I try and be creative when I name podcasts, whether it's topical for the time of year we're in, inspired by something happening in the world, inspired by something happening in our league. I try and be a little bit, you know, relevant in terms of what the title is to what's happening. So I just had to think that since the combine just happened, saying your powers combined, see, get it? Combine, combined. I'm super clever. But apparently that also helps show my age. I'm turning 41 this year, and I guess that probably puts me in the elder statesman in the league. Um, but I like that. But I was encouraged by the sheer number of people who not just knew who Captain Planet was, but jumped right in a comedy reboot that Don Cheadle did to it about 10 years ago, of what happened to Captain Planet if he didn't have a heart. So the good news is that some of my aged references still work on some of the younger crowd here, makes me feel relevant. But another thing that helps me feel relevant is getting back into the rookie part of the calendar and back into the dynasty part of the calendar, because there's that quiet period between the Super Bowl, actually even for us, between the playoffs and the combine, where maybe things are happening, maybe things aren't. Coaches are getting hired, maybe players are getting renegotiated, but the real start of our calendar is the combine. So it's nice to see things start up again. It's nice to see the activity kick up again in terms of some of the trades. Being rolled over to 2025 is a nice thing, and everyone getting comfortable on the site, plus having the numbers next to the picks is a great thing. And we're going to spend some time today breaking some stuff down. And I love this time of the year because very little is known, a lot is rumored. And in situations like we had last week, where not a lot of information was conveyed, it's an opportunity for us to all learn a little bit more. So I appreciate that the Broncos, the Eagles, and the Colts are here with me tonight to share some of their knowledge. I appreciate the takes and the other things getting posted in the league to help those of us who just don't know as much. Because the nice thing about this is iron sharpens iron. We all become better fantasy players by being in this league, and we get to take that knowledge and that skill and kick the shit out of other unsuspecting owners in other leagues. So, gentlemen, thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your time. And you know what? Thank you for making me into the monster that I am everywhere else.
I mean, happy to do it. Not that you're not currently a monster in the league after recent transactions.
I'm just a monster, and I enjoy it. And hey, you've got Dooku after looking like three monsters after losing both of his hands. So, um, it's the right background for the right situation here.
It's a
So,
little shocking, It's a little shocking.
well done. Anyways, as mentioned, the combine did happen last week, so we're going to spend some time talking about rookies and kind of what we learned. Um, Kind of picking up from last year, a lot of the top picks showed up for interviews but didn't do a whole lot else. They took measurements on some things, maybe participated in a drill or two, but that was kind of it. We only got information on a couple of what we would call the elite prospects. Everyone else seems to be saving it for their pro day. So we'll react to the information that we have. We'll talk about the stuff that still needs to be decided and kind of some of the things we're thinking about so far, both from an NFL perspective and a fantasy perspective. And then I do realize the last couple of times we've tried to pod, we actually haven't covered the trades that have happened. So we've got a bit of a backlog of trades we need to go through, let alone everything that's happened this week. So um, we'll spend some time at the end doing that. So this one may be a bit of a marathon. Hope everyone is prepared and ready to do that, especially considering we had a nice warm up talk for some of the stuff last night. But I'm looking forward to the conversation. Like, these are some of my favorite podcasts because we get into it, and next thing I look down, and it's been 45 minutes.
It's just how our conversations go. They never end.
It's good conversation. Lose track of time. But Bill, RJ, any thoughts before we jump in?
No.
Happy Mardi Gras.
Yes, it is. We had Fat Tuesday yesterday, and it's Ash Wednesday today. So now we need to think about what we're giving up for Lent, and it's clearly not fantasy football. But anyways, we, of course, did bat around a couple of topics before the pod began. And one that kind of came up that I think is really a good place to start with this class is, how do some of these players fit, and how do we think the NFL is talking about some of this stuff? So let me explain that with a few more words. When we look at a draft class like last year, there were a lot of elite receivers coming out and a lot of talk about the quarterbacks and a lot of things kind of built around that. This year, it seems to be more in the trenches focused with linemen and offensive linemen and defensive linemen getting a lot of the coverage. A lot of questions on the quarterback side, not necessarily the same level or I'd say certainty around where that break point is like there was last year, and probably less on the skill position, but where there's not the same kind of depth. We definitely still have a couple of elite prospects at both running back and wide receiver. But one of the concepts that I've seen in basketball that sometimes gets applied to football that RJ brought up that I think is really important, I want to introduce it and leave it, kind of kick it over to him to kind of talk through kind of his assessment, is if you think about valuations of picks or players. So is a player worth a top 5 pick? Is a player worth a top 10 pick in a general class? A top 25 pick? A first round pick? A second round pick? Kind of where would we put the skill set that player brings, the value of that position, and all other things being equal with no teams, no other players, depth of the position, needs on the roster, where would that combination of skills and position slot in a average or agnostic class? And when we look at this class, I think there's a lot of different assessments of where we see a undervalue, where, hey, it's a top 5 pick and maybe we only see 2 or 3 of these, or a overabundance where for the top 25, maybe we have 30 players we put in that category. So RJ, do you want to kind of start us off with kind of some of the things that you're thinking about in that range?
Sure. So as far as draft prospects for this year, are we talking about why we're going to get steals in the second round, or that we have a gap in the mid rounds? Which one do you want me to touch on?
Whatever you want to touch on, man. This is a free-flowing conversation. I want you guys to make the points you feel comfortable making.
So a couple of the ideas that were thrown about when we were discussing this is that the way this class breaks down is there's probably 7 players that are worthy of a top 10 pick. In a general sense, if they were in any other year of the draft, like mixed in with those classes. But then, there aren't 7 picks in the top 10. So you have to find some players to fill that in. And there's a log jam of players that are worthy of late first round picks or early second round picks, so much so that it may kind of spill over to the late second, even early third round. But because we can't just skip all of those middling picks, there are going to be players that are drafted a little bit early just because of the lack of choices. And this is when you break down prospects in comparison to what they are compared to previous draft classes. So like the running backs in this class are pretty good, but like, all right, I'm gonna start to go off the rails. So Mike, do you wanna?
I'll touch on that real quick. Because I like that idea. And the thing that it really it kind of holds true regardless of the pick spot. If that player produces, usually people don't care where they get, right? So you may have a guy like, I don't know, let's just take Isaiah Bond for example. Probably not a first rounder. Ran a little slower than he was trying to say he was going to run at the combine. Fall into the second round. Let's say he goes like 128. I can't remember who's picked the Lions. He goes right around there, 128, 129. Everyone goes, oh, it's kind of a reach. Well, if he goes out and has a 1,000-yard, 8-touchdown rookie season, nobody cares if he was drafted in the first round instead of the second. They care that it was a good pick, and he's a good player. So as long as you hit on your pick, yeah, and people may say it was a reach in the beginning, but you have a lot of really good players that are falling into that range. It feels like you're more likely to hit on a player that is good. And I think that gives some teams a little bit of a safety net towards the back of the first, early second.
Yeah, and I'm glad that RJ brought up the concept before we got into the pod because when I kind of looked at the class so far, and I think we're speaking about this in NFL terms still, not necessarily our GM's terms. Am I right on that? Or are you guys thinking from a GM's perspective?
Yep,
I'm thinking,
mine is NFL. My basis is like NFL ready, and
yeah,
you know, like the products of what they are right now, with no real like expectations as far as like where they've landed or anything like that. If we're just comparing like pure prospects,
I'm using NFL personally, just because like you can have guys that get drafted and they don't put up a bunch of numbers, which doesn't do anything for fantasy, but they're a very good player and obvious. Kind of like Jordan Davis. It's like, yeah, okay, he doesn't put up 6 sacks a season and 80 tackles, but the dude makes the Eagles' run defense the best in the league when he's on the field. Worth that pick.
Right. So if I'm going, and I'm going to go conservative with these numbers, if I say there's one quarterback worthy of top 10, one running back, one receiver, one tight end, 2 offensive linemen, 2 edge, a defensive tackle, and 2 corners. That puts me at 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 players. And I feel like that's being conservative at a couple positions.
Like for this draft, or are you talking about like overall drafts?
I mean players that I'm being conservative of because I think there are 2 players at receiver that are worthy of top 10 consideration. I think there's a second running back that is should be in the conversation for top 10.
Would they be top 10 if they were in last year's class? That's kind of my judgment.
Yes. Every single one of those players, yes.
Over guys like Malik Neighbors, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix.
So that's the point.
So
it's agnostic. So Odunze, Neighbors, and Harrison last year for me were no question top 5 or top 10 at the very least wide receivers in any class. And this year, I'm saying there's at least one of those.
Yep,
I agree with the one. Yeah,
one, maybe 2.
Yeah,
I personally disagree with there being a tight end or.
No, I think there might be 2 tight ends
as a top 10 pick.
Mm-hmm.
So just because I say top 10 doesn't mean we're getting Brock Bowers or Sam Laporta this year.
Right.
But that's my metric. If you are picking a tight end in the top 10 over impact positions like edge, like left tackle, like wide receiver, they need to produce like a Sam Laporta or Brock Bowers.
So Brock Bowers, no shit, broke the receptions record for all rookies.
Yeah.
That cannot be the measurement for success the top 10.
But tight end is just so low, not quite low value, but so much lower value than those other positions.
But that's the thing. Like you're taking into consideration what the product has already done. Like a Brock Bowers when he came out last year, yeah, I would put the other 2 tight ends at a similar standing. Now, are they gonna fall into the right situation where they're gonna put up numbers like him? Probably not. But as a prospect before, pre-landing spot, I think there's two that are at a very similar level to what he was.
I mean, I respect your opinion, but I can't get it.
Well, and that's a great part. We should and we are allowed to disagree in this. It's one of those, and that was kind of my point. Is if I add up the numbers I put out there, and I feel like those numbers are on the conservative side, and even on the conservative side, people disagree that that's still maybe too high to go positions. That gets me to 10. RJ at first blush was thinking there's 7. My first blush is that there's at least 10 in that range, and Rory sounds like may have different numbers in his head.
I got like
Where that
5 or
falls.
6. I'm kind of with RJ.
So it's going to be interesting to see where, as our assessments and as we get more information, our values fall. Because that's the other thing. I'm talking about one of those tight ends, and he didn't run at the combine. So I'm assuming I know what his speed is based off of what people are expecting on what they saw on the football field. But until it's his pro day, I'm not going to get a number. And I still might not get a number. They might say, heck with it. Or they may say, well, we'll do it during workouts or stuff like that. Like, people have started understanding that information is a value in this league, and controlling the flow of it is an advantage worth, investing in for some stuff. So I get that. But again, kind of where those breakpoints are going to be, because that's the other thing, especially when we convert that to our league format. Like, those offensive linemen, obviously you don't have a place in our league. Those corners are going to be third rounders in our league format. Maybe late
Defensive
second,
tackles.
depending on that D tackle. Yeah, again, probably going to fall till, some go in the late first, some are early second in that time frame. As people say, do I go for the the gut shot straight draw on the receiver, or do I take a D tackle that I fit out? That range. But if I look at it just from an R League perspective, I think there's probably 2, maybe 3 quarterbacks. I think there's 2, maybe 3 running backs, 2, maybe 3 receivers. I think that tight end, maybe a second one, sneaks into our top 10. And then the edge rushers become the conversation. I would say that I like some of the linebackers, but I think it's probably going to be too early for that. But again, that count has me at 11 or 12 considered players for the top 10. And as we get more testing data, that number is probably going to drop. But coming out of the combine, I feel like that's still the number. And again, some people are going to be like, 2's too low on the running backs. You got to have at least 4 there. Or you're out of your mind saying 2, maybe 3 for the receivers, especially with some of the performances we got from some of the, probably not the first names out of your mouth from this receiving class. And the fact that we had a shitload of running backs and wide receivers, I feel like running the 4-4s or better. Like, we didn't have the Xavier Worthy 4-2-1 or the 4, or yeah, I think it was a 4-2-1. But we had a shitload of other really fast players.
4 3s, basically across the board.
Yeah. Some of those guys were fucking big.
No, I actually wouldn't be surprised to see that number go up. I think 2 wide receivers is probably pretty firm, at least for me, for a top 10 pick. But I would not be at all shocked if 4, maybe even a 5th running back crept into the top 10. I think at least 1 edge, potentially 2, if it's a good landing spot, could end up right there at that 9-10 spot.
We're talking about our league now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Certainly 2 quarterbacks. I'd be shocked if Shedeur Sanders didn't get picked as a top 10 pick. Even if he falls like into the second round, someone is going to pull Will Levis, draft him early. What else? Tight ends. Warren, I would be shocked if he doesn't go in the top 10. If Colston, Giants is here. If Colston goes to the Chargers, I know for me, like, obviously I'm a Chargers fan, but I think the rest of the league can agree that with Jim Harbaugh and his offense, what he wants to do, drafting a guy he's already familiar with, I feel like you have to have Sam Laporta like set up to begin the year or begin his career. So you could have him sneak into the top 10. I wouldn't be shocked to see 14 guys be considered as top 10 players for our draft.
And again, I expect that number to go down because we're thinking that, and I feel like it was a similar, it's a similar cycle every year where after the combine, we have people push their way into a conversation we weren't necessarily expecting. Then pro days happen, which either validate or conflict with some of those positions we have. And then the draft happened, and it's like, oh my God, Brock Bowers really had to go to the fucking Las Vegas Raiders. Oh my God, that sucks. Like, oh, fucking Malik Neighbors, who's going to throw him the ball? Or, holy shit, Rome Odunze's on that offense. He's going to be the third best receiver. He's never going to see a target. Like, so these guys that we were like, oh, definitely top 10 in terms of talent or value. And it's like, oh, landing spot, fuck. And unfortunately, landing spot matters in our league. And in real life league, both from a development and otherwise perspective. So this is the cycle. This is what happens. We get it. But this is the part of the cycle where we're always, I think, a little bit more optimistic with players before we get more information. And one of the 2 times in the year that NFL teams aren't allowed to lie to us, stealing that from Player Profiler, where so again, to clarify, the 2 times that they say the NFL is not allowed to lie to us, because everyone loves coach speak, is the free agency period where you actually have to open your checkbook and spend money on the things you feel are important. And if you feel something's important, you're going to spend money on it. So you can't lie to us there. And then in the draft, if you draft a player at a certain position, if you draft a position at a certain level of the draft, if you don't draft something on a certain level, if you don't prioritize something, if you trade up to get a certain player, like, you are telling the truth of how you feel about that position, that player, and their responsibility and role on your team. But nonetheless, that's at least the early part. But one of the first things I think you said, RJ, was you kind of have a feel that kind of that end of first, second, or mid-round is going to be a really fun spot for us this year. And I agree.
Yeah, I think this draft class is quite deep. We're going to find a lot of players that are just quality prospects. Of course, like, landing spot is always going to be a concern until we know that. But there's there's 52 guys that you'll probably be happy to have, and there's only 32 spots in the second round. So, there's gonna be a lot of extra players that, when you get to even the third round, you'll be happy to draft them.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel at some point in the draft, and you guys can disagree with me or tell me that I'm, reading too much into it, but I felt like last year that there was a point where it just becomes in the draft where it just becomes kind of the Wild West, where there's enough coverage on fantasy draft and enough rankings lists and enough sort of services out there that, again, it's not going to be the same order, it's not going to be the same ranking, but 80% agree on kind of the ranges and average value of some of these players. And they start to run out of players and information probably in that 50th player range, even though they say, oh, well, we go 200 deep, we go 500 deep, we go whatever deep. Great. In terms of consensus and agreement and standard deviation, I feel like that some point at the end of the first round into the mid-second round that holds, and then it just goes nuts. Where it's kind of like, hey, I have a third round grade on this player, but he's still sitting there staring me in the face in the fourth round. Or someone just took that someone at 228. Like, I didn't have that player on my board. Like, it just becomes someone you like them and you feel like that's where their relative value is, so you jump up and take them. And it's 3 people agree with you and 4 people think you're out of your freaking mind. And I feel like that is going to start in this class around the 125.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, every year has steals. Like I don't know. I can't recall where Tyrone Tracy went in this draft. But I think he would be considered a steal.
I think he was a
just
third rounder.
around.
I
Yeah,
think he was like
so,
the first pick in the third round or something. Yeah.
I mean, he's
Yeah.
one of those guys that just it's a steal. And
I was throwing
they're-
darts at running backs the entire second round, thinking I had the waterfront covered, and I missed Tyrone Tracy. So good on Rams for picking up the scraps that I left behind, but he got the good one.
Yeah. And I don't know if it'll start as early as 125 just because of how deep the running back and edge class is this year. I think we'll still get some guys that make a lot of sense right up until probably about the 203, 204 and beyond. Just
Nah.
personally.
Watch by like 113 people try to scramble to trade out because they're gonna assess all of the prospects on the board and not consider them worth like a first round. So
Interesting.
They'll try to move out if they can get a 26 first.
I wonder who has 113.
I mean, it might not necessarily be 113, but somewhere around there.
That's Vikings. He's got 113.
But yeah,
I got a lot of picks.
Heard it here first. You need to trade out of that pick, man.
no, not necessarily. Just I think when people start to get on the clock, they will look at it and go, "Oh, there's nobody I deem as a first round pick." Now, most of those people might be incorrect, but
That kind of happened to
I do
me
expect that to happen.
right around 10 last year,
Mhm.
where it's like, okay, Brian Thomas is gone. Quarterbacks are gone. Bowers is gone. Yeah, I could take the first edge off the board. I could take the first running back. Not a huge fan of the running backs. I could take like the fifth receiver. At that point, you're just kind of like,
Right.
is anyone worth this pick?
Well, that's the effect of like having decent depth like this class is going to have. So like, Raiders is on the clock and he wants a running back, but he looks at the ones available and there are 14 of them that he wouldn't mind having on his roster. But now it's
He
just
moves back.
Right, exactly.
And I think a lot of NFL teams kind of have the same thing. Now, granted, if everyone in the league is saying, there's all these players on my board still, I have no reason to trade up, then inevitably no trade backs are going to happen.
Mhm.
But I would not be shocked. This year's draft feels like it could go one of two ways, and it's really one or the other. Either we don't see really any trade outs at all, or we see a lot of trade ups. And I really don't know which direction this is going to go. Because would I be shocked to see a high caliber team like the Eagles come up if Mason Graham is falling and grab someone like him or grab the second edge off the board if they're falling? I don't know. Could happen.
And again, there's a lot of these articles, but I do enjoy reading Matthew Berry's that he does. He had a point in his article, I feel like this year, where somebody said that they are expecting a ton of trades in this first round this year. And this was something that was interesting too. And I don't know if this is still accurate. I read this someplace. Every single team in the NFL has their first round pick still.
That feels like it cannot possibly be true.
It is true. It
That's
is true.
crazy.
There's something to the effect of everybody has held their pick for the year, and any trade that goes through that involves first round picks can't be processed until the new year. So everyone will technically hold their own picks until March 12th at earliest.
Okay, so let me put a draft tech and see if that is true. I use them as a trade value chart. When I want to see the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart, I go to that one. Tennessee, Cleveland Giants. New England, Jacksonville, Vegas, Jets. Yeah, there are no traded first round picks yet. The first traded pick is a second round, Chicago to Carolina for the DJ Moore trade. And then Buffalo giving
Other way
Minnesota
around, right?
through Houston for the Stephon Diggs trade. And then Carolina to the Carolina from the Rams for the Fisk trade. But the entire first round is still intact. Every team still has a first round pick.
Well, I would not be shocked if this is the year that a couple teams kind of go nuts.
And that's the thing. If you still have your first rounder, everything is on the table. You can start stacking those to go get a big time player, move up, move down, all sorts of different things. Everything is a possibility for this, especially when you have that. And all but 3 second rounders are still with the original teams. Now, thirds are all over the place, fourths are all over the place, fifths are all, everything else later is a dog's breakfast. But we talk about the first 60 picks and only 3 have new homes. That's a lot of firepower still left in the trading tank here. All right, should we talk about some of the players? I don't know. We were talking about this last night, and I didn't quite realize it because honestly, I didn't have a chance to watch the combine as much as I usually do. There was a lot of people that didn't do anything at some of these positions. I feel like there's always like at least a set, like it's maybe like 3 to 5 that do nothing, but there's always like at least a strong set at each position of people who perform at some like every drill, who are there because it's like, look, I'm somewhere on day 3 and I'm trying to make it to day 2, or I'm on day 2 and I'm trying to get to day 1, or I'm trying to hold my spot on day 2, and everyone needs to perform so that they can hold those spots. But I feel like there was just a lot of people this year that just didn't show up.
Well, didn't Neighbors and Adunze both run the combine last year?
Yeah, they did.
Feels like last year had a lot of big
No,
show-ups.
I don't know if Rome did.
Rome
Rome did
definitely
because remember he refused to get off the field on the 10-yard shuttle or whatever because he was trying to get a certain time.
Okay. Oh, it was only Harrison that didn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Harrison was the only one that didn't. So you had a whole slew of first-round receivers that ran. You had other than Jonathan Brooks, who was injured, I think most of the running backs, which not a great class. Quarterbacks, basically all of them, but Caleb Williams performed, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, except for Caleb and Marvin, I feel like everyone else felt like they had to distinguish themselves versus others in their tier.
Which is
Whereas-
crazy.
Yeah.
Those guys are better than most of everybody in this class. So, like,
Well, yeah, and again, that's the thing. Like, there were definitely, ranking services and fantasy sites and stuff like that that came out of the combine last year and said Malik Neighbors is the number 1 receiver this year because we have confirmation on these numbers. We saw what his production was. Now we've got confirmation on his numbers because we've actually seen it. So as a result, he's got to be this because we suspect this for Harrison, but we've confirmed it for Neighbors. And again, I feel like there was a lot of opportunity for others to do that, and they didn't. And whether they feel that, hey, there's only maybe a 2-horse race there, so I don't have to worry as much about it, or it's so populated that it doesn't make sense to distinguish it myself, or they don't see anyone else in their league. It was just like I was looking at linebackers, and I think
there was not very many linebackers.
This is the new normal.
There were 39 wide receivers that ran the 40, but only 10 of them participated in the 3-cone.
It feels like to me the 3-cone is a more important drill for a wide receiver's
It is.
numbers. I mean, and here's the thing that really bothers me. It makes a lot of like Travis Hunter, I get it, right? He's pretty much locked in. Like he's more than likely is going top 5 because of his skill set. There's no real reason for him to go out there. The same can probably be said about Abdul Carter and Tet McMillan. Outside of that, I don't think there's a single player that did not participate that earned whatever position that they're getting, thinking they're going to get drafted at. It just doesn't make sense to me.
It's not about
You got well, I mean, it's not about damaging your draft stock, I guess. Or it's
right. It's
about
about
not
making
doing
sure you don't get injured.
sure, but that doesn't change the fact that last year you had all these big names participate. All of them came out fine. It's
Yeah.
pretty damn rare to have somebody get injured in the combine. I feel like I never hear about a big name getting injured.
I think this is going to be the new normal. NIL deals are paying millions of dollars. Outside of like the hyper competitive guys, above the hyper competitive guys that already exist, I think they don't care because they're already millionaires.
I mean, that could be true. I'm willing to say that probably is true. But guys like Shedeur Sanders, right? He is not locked in as a top quarterback. He is not really locked in as a first-round pick.
100%.
In my mind,
100%.
I don't know personally.
He's a top 5 pick, top 10 pick.
There's been a lot of talk about this is not a first-round player. And usually with a player like that, there's a lot of talk about him being like up there. Like think about Malik Willis years ago. Everybody was hyping him up before the draft. This year, everyone's hyping down on Sanders. I'm not convinced he's a first-round talent personally. I didn't get to see him throw. I didn't get to see him run. I didn't get to see any of his measurables. I didn't get to see anything about the guy.
Did you not watch Colorado this year?
Who'd they play?
They played the opponents they had to play.
I understand that, but that doesn't mean that he's worthy of being one of the top 5 picks, of being the top quarterback taken. You don't take a guy that's coming out of D2 that put up 2,000 yards at receiver, led the nation in all receiver stats, basically worth mentioning, and suddenly say he's a first-round pick.
Josh Allen. Josh Allen did that literally 8 years ago.
Wisconsin's not D2.
Wyoming is D2.
Wyoming. Wyoming's D2.
They may as well. If they're not, they may as well be.
I don't think Wyoming is D2.
But neither is Colorado.
No, and I'm what I was referencing is there was a wide receiver, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, and he had like 1,700 yards, led all these stats in wide receiver. He didn't win the best receiver award.
You talking about the guy with San Diego State?
That's the one, yeah.
Or San Jose State or whatever it is.
Whatever it is, yeah, that guy. No one's out here saying that guy should be a top 10 pick because he put up all these huge numbers. He didn't play. He didn't play anyone worth mentioning. He didn't play any talent that's going to go in the first round or even the second round. Did Colorado play a single defense that had a defender that's likely to go in the first 2 rounds of the draft this year? I don't think they did.
I don't know. They played USC.
I don't think they played USC last year.
Oh, let's look the internet. Let's look it up. Sorry about that. My hotel connection dropped out here, but I appreciate you guys picking up and moving along here.
It's all good. I understand the argument right now is about whether or not he's like worthy of a first round. But as far as the quarterbacks this year go, I think that the only thing you really need to know about the quarterbacks, as far as like whether you should or shouldn't overdraft them, the number 1 and number 2 teams in the draft both have quarterback needs, and both of them are more than willing to trade down.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I get it, but I also guess you got to ask yourself, if you are the Titans or Browns, is Shedeur Sanders worth paying all this money and spending what is – I mean, I shouldn't even put the Browns there because I almost said what's likely to be the only top 2 pick you have in the next couple of years. Browns are always picking the top 2, so I shouldn't even say it. For the Titans, not there very often. So you're going a guy that you like. If you don't like Sanders, you're not going Sanders. If you don't like Cam Ward, you're not going Ward. if you don't think that they're the guy, then you can't go. You have to go Abdul Carter or even Ted McMillan because it just doesn't make any sense to spend his premier pick on a guy that you're not sold on. And I don't know if any teams are sold on Sanders.
Well, Cleveland apparently really likes Sanders, and they're too. Say
Well,
what
you
we
know,
will about Browns quarterbacks.
that is Cleveland. I shouldn't be shocked at all. He'll be the next Johnny Manziel now.
Now, the other aspect that we've heard is they're willing to move down. I think the language I heard about the Titans was it would take a Caleb Williams level haul for them to move out of the position. And look, if anybody comes with a Caleb Williams level haul for a pick where it's actually it was a Bryce Young haul, apologies. 2 firsts, 2 second, and a starter. Like for the 101. Like, okay, yeah, if someone comes for that, or someone comes with a Jared Goff haul, or a Carson Wentz haul, or an RG3 haul, yeah, you're going to be willing to move out of the top 3, and you want to encourage those, obviously. But, you know, it's, like I said, it's the time of year where everybody's lying to us.
Mhm.
So we'll see what they do. If you know, in free agency, we see the Titans go out and try and tighten up their pass rush situation, then maybe Carter's not where they're really thinking about. They're not really sold because there's no one in front of them. So if they want to address that position, they can. If they go big after Darnold, then Cam Ward's probably not going there. Like some of this stuff is, you know, we'll see what they'll actually tell us when they can't lie to us. But yeah, I'm dubious on Sanders as well. I think there's definitely he has those highlight throws where either on the run or from a pocket that's under pressure or things like that, he puts a couple throws on the money. But some of his throwing motion and stuff like that, it's kind of like, dude, this is not shot put.
Yeah. Well, I saw an analyst or a scout or someone wrote something. I can't remember if it was on Twitter or what. And I really like the quote because it's very true. And that is, Sanders had quite a few completions for Buffalo that in the NFL will be interceptions. So whether or not that's actually true, that carries over, that's a lingering problem or whatever. If you're going out there on the college field, like Anthony Richardson, and you're making throws that happen to be completed in the NFL level, they will not. You're going to have a DB blanking the guy. You guys hear that?
Joey Bosa just got
the Bosa news, yeah.
Yeah, it's very sad. I'm very sad.
Well, welcome to the Niners, Joey.
Yeah, no kidding. I hope he plays with his brother. He deserves to go somewhere that he wants to.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, play with your brother.
All right.
Go ahead.
Any other major players you want to touch on? No, we haven't touched on a bunch so far. It's just kind of general.
I think that there is a more than reasonable chance that Genty isn't the first running back taken.
Yeah, I read that. I think of the 7 teams that looked at both running backs, it was something like 5-2 or 4-3 split between Genty versus Omarion. But
yeah,
that's the other thing that's surprising is the split, which I expected some split. Everyone always has a bit of a split, so that's not surprising. The surprise is how even it is, and the fact that people are putting Genty at 5 to the Raiders.
I mean, I think that'd be the stupidest move on the Raiders' part, but, more power to them.
depends on who they get in free agency at quarterback, if they get somebody at quarterback.
I mean, do the Raiders not have 7 more positions that they have greater needs at than running back, though?
I mean, they pretty badly need a running back, too.
Sure, but as a top 8 pick, I mean, wouldn't it be better to spend that kind of draft capital on a Luther Burden or a Will Johnson or
Bijan was a top 10 pick.
But he went to a team that was already fairly complete. Like the Falcons were in pretty good. Pretty good shape. They had at that time. Didn't they have Drake London, and they still had
Desmond Ritter.
Matt. Yeah, maybe they did have Desmond Ritter at the time, but they had Tyler Algier, who just had a big year, which it doesn't make any sense to me. They got Bijan in general. Decent line, a decent secondary. I'm not saying Bijan is a good pick either. I get it. But the Raiders are, I think, in a far worse position than the Falcons were at that time. The Falcons have turned it around pretty quick.
Well, they have to build the offense from somewhere.
I would start with a player that doesn't have a shelf life of 6 years. Like Luther Bird, for example. Or, an edge. Or Mason Graham. Pair him with Christian Wilkins. That'd be unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's those inflection spots in the draft. Obviously, kind of every pick in the top 5 is going to be that inflection spot. There's not one where it's like, hey, these guys are clearly going this direction because that's what they need, and there's this player available at that spot for them. Like the Titans could go quarterback or pass rusher probably. Hunter's in play for the Browns. Quarterbacks in play for the Browns. Carter's in play for the Browns. Then you start getting into, do you go offensive lineman with Campbell or someone like that? When does Mason Graham start trickling in there? Where does Will Johnson or other corners jump into the conversation? That second quarterback, what about Ted McMillan or that second running back like we were talking about earlier? So it feels a whole lot more fluid in that range as well. And, 'tis the season, we'll probably start seeing a big trade or two of teams moving around or moving up or otherwise, but that's coming.
That's true.
All right, speaking of trades, let's look at some of the stuff that has happened over the last couple of weeks. So I was thinking about last couple of podcasts. When's the last time that we covered trades? You guys remember?
I don't. I got a quick question real quick before we move on to trades.
Yep.
What's everyone's favorite player from the combine? What was the player they were most excited to see? If you care to share. I mean, if it's like a secret, you would tell you.
So I'll say mine, and I'm fine with it. I was not paying attention to this player at all, and he's jumped up a bunch of boards, and it's Matthew Golden. Like, I was not thinking about him in the top of the wide receiver boards at all, and then he goes out and he runs a 4.29, I think it was.
Yep, he killed it.
Like that. Yeah, you did really well.
Holy shit! Like, and then I was watching tape earlier today, like Quinn Ewers tape. I'm starting with the quarterbacks, watching Ewers tape, and of his throws, like a lot of them were just kind of, hey, Golden's down there someplace, and it's him adjusting and him making it look like, wow, Ewers really dropped that in the bucket. But a lot of the time, it's the Ewers just threw it up there, and Golden adjusted and ran the route so that it was in the bucket, and it was him going up for balls. It was him running under balls. It was him screening defenders. It was him just doing things in all sorts of different ways. But the big plays that Texas had, it was going to Golden. So because of his performance and then because of going back and looking at some of the tape for that, Golden has jumped way up on my board.
I agree with you. I really liked how Golden performed. Would have really liked to see a broad jump and 3-con drill out of him. A little disappointed that didn't get done, but I agree. I think that he had a really good. I'll do my guy next. I was really excited with how Landon Jackson. I like that guy a lot. He's kind of He's got like a unique look to him. He reminds me of that Steelers linebacker Ryan Shazier. And I don't know, it's got to be like alopecia or something that gives him that like no eyebrows or hair. But to me, it's like such an intimidating presence already. And then he goes out, he's 6'6", 264, runs a 4.68, jumps really high, jumps far. He's had such a fun rise. I was a pretty big fan of his combine. Would have liked to see his bench press, but what do you do?
Yeah, that was surprising too. I feel like a lot of the people who I'd expect to put up bench presses in the 30s, I think the highest bench press was 28.
Yeah, Mason Graham shocked me. He only put up like 26 or something. What did he put up bench? Graham only put up 24 bench press, which feels like a pretty big underperformance for the best D tackle in the draft.
Yeah, I think the kid from Miami, Nolan, what was that old mess? Made up some ground on him. But Bill or RJ, anyone kind of jump out on your? Again, you don't have to review your board if you don't want to. But if there's anyone that kind of opened your eyes in the last weekend.
Oh, I don't have a board anymore.
I was disappointed in Tez Johnson.
Yeah, I think what's he 150 pounds soaking wet?
Yeah, on a good day. I just expected a little bit more speed out of him. Like he's probably going to be. I expect him to be a decent player at the NFL level, but I'm a little bit more hesitant after seeing 4.5 40.
Yeah, for a guy his size, I would have expected a lot more speed. That being said, he had a really good 3 count, didn't he?
6.65. I think it was the top out of the draft class.
He beat the next best by a full 1/10 of a second, when everybody else was like, 2 100ths off of each other.
Yeah.
But 4.5. Maybe he just had a bad day, but I feel like he's faster.
Yeah, that just when you don't have the body type to look like it, you at least need to have the hit all of the boxes in the athleticism.
Yeah, he hit everything else. Like I don't know why I really like when receivers have really good. I feel like that's a good indication. That and the 3 count drill is a really good indication of their athleticism, their fluidity. So he had the 4th best broad jump at 10.11, best 3 count drill. I mean, 4.51 at 154 pounds is crazy. And maybe he just, like I was saying earlier to James, if he can just be Tyler Lockett and literally never take a hit, he'll be fine. Be a good player. It just, if he takes one solid hit on a crossing route, he will die.
Yep.
So I don't know. I agree though. That was a disappointing comment.
Yep.
I was surprised by Judkins' dominance. I knew he was like a good runner, but I think his combine made me respect him a bit more.
I mean, he put up freakishly athletic numbers.
Yeah, and that's one of the stuff where, because of some of those numbers, it's a much different running back landscape, and we're going to hear a lot of different things, I think, in terms of how those get ordered now. I think most people have Genty 1, but again, as mentioned, some probably put Omarion up there too. Then whether it's Henderson, it's Judkins, it's Cameron Johnson, it's all manner of beasts after that, Scatabo, stuff like that. It's just a collection of 1 and 2s, not, I guess, truly set, although I think there's probably a consensus. But then from 2 to 8, the range on those, it's going to be, you're going to see Hampton in that 2 to 6 range. You're going to see Henderson in that 2 to 7 range. You're going to see Judkins in that 2 to 6 or 7 range. It's like, hey, you need to trade up to a certain spot to make sure you get a player. It's like, well, are you sure that you're trading up high enough?
Yeah. I think going into the combine, and I might be wrong, but I think Henderson had an edge on Judkins. I think after the combine, I think Judkins regained that edge on Henderson, personally.
All right. So I'm not going to go back to the old site. I'm just going to cover the 30 trades that have happened since we've rolled over. Call it lazy, call it whatever. I'm over it.
We'll call it smart.
Well, it is what it is. So Sands kicked off the trading when we rolled over. 209 for Parker Washington, and the Bengals first next year for 213, and Los Angeles's the Rams second round pick in 26. So trying to establish what the renegotiation value is going to be on some of these receivers with an opportunity to jump from cuts and future picks converting to this year's draft. So going to try and set the market to trade some Saints. I think we've seen some different values versus what was done there, but I like Parker Washington. I drafted Parker Washington. Kirk obviously got cut today, but that could be a very, let's say, relatively cheap extension in contract for him to build around one of his 5,000 receivers. And then the Bengals first is anticipated late next year, so getting a mid-second this year, and what, again, Rams would hope is a late second for that. I don't know. I feel like that was on the cheap side for a future first.
I actually like that trade for the future first. I think that there is a not outside chance that those two picks could be like 5 or 6 spots apart next year, and he added a mid-second on top. Now, I really didn't like the first trade. I mean, yeah, Parker Washington's like technically wide receiver 2 in the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I can't imagine it stays that way. Especially with how deep like running back and DN is in this class, there could be some pretty interesting players still at 2 of them.
Yeah, that's fair. Bill jumps in 222 for the Commanders second next year, and Commanders fourth next year. Raiders moving the Steelers first, Kansas City first next year, the Steelers second, and Kansas City third next year for 115, 204, and 303 from the Broncos as he moves to try and challenge the Dolphins next year for their pick haul in 26.
Worthy endeavor. This feels like just almost a straight across. I like it. Broncos probably came out a little on top. I like it.
I don't know. The Commanders deal feels very fair, very even. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if the second round pick ended up being 222 again, depending on how he drafts and moves the board this year. The Raiders, I gave up early seconds and thirds for late seconds and thirds next year to get probably the same pick from Steelers and just pick up an extra one. But I don't hate either of these. I thought this was a good launching point for what I was doing.
I mean, definitely moving your capital in next year, which I like. And I think both of them are pretty straight across. I totally agree. Commander's pick could easily be 222. That's basically straight across. The Raiders Broncos one, you just have to hope that the Pittsburgh Steelers don't compete. That's basically what you're hoping, which is totally possible in that fucking division. That division.
I'm just assuming that he's going to be fourth like he has been for the last 5 years.
The Ravens could surprise all of us and just go, you know what, fuck, and I'm just going to blow it up.
I agree. I think the Ravens are not as primely positioned as they used to be.
And
so I think Steelers could be third in that division.
Yeah. But again, I mean, you picked up an extra one for an early second. I mean, I like it. It's good. It's a good trade.
All right. Then I get to get involved. Elijah Moore and Nick Benito for 118 through 17, which I traded a mid third to get Elijah and a mid to late first to get Benito. So pretty much in line what I spent to get them, I traded them for. So keeping things pretty flat.
Did
You got a pick upgrade on the first for sure. I think it was like 28 that you paid for Benito.
yeah? Did the Pats extend Benito, and we're just
No.
waiting?
Well, he extended Elijah Moore. I don't know about Benito. Maybe does Benito have to like wait?
I think because he's Pro Bowl, it needs to wait until the draft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I can go look. I'm on the trade page right now too, so let me go look. I like the trade. I think it was mildly crazy that he did extend him as well. So he traded a first and a third to take on like 40-ish million in cap for one good player and one okay player.
Yeah.
I mean,
Moore
I really
targeted.
like Benito.
He's the
And
good
I
player.
think-
I like Benito a lot.
Yeah, and I think Elijah Moore is like a good dart throw. It might have been like a little rich, just knowing that like Mike paid the 28 for Benito, like knowing exactly what Mike just said. He paid for both those players and he flipped them for essentially like 10 picks higher in the first. Like, that's not ideal, but
I'm going to be honest. I liked Elijah Moore for 3 years. I have given up. Every year coming into the season, I'm like, okay, this is the year Elijah
all right,
Moore's
but to be
finally break
fair,
out.
the teams that he's been a part of have been the Zach Wilson Jets and the Deshaun Watson Browns.
For sure. He's still there though. So I mean, it's like, it's not getting any better. Maybe they get lucky with the quarterback and suddenly they're good again. But
No,
right now,
isn't he a
still-
free agent?
I think he got re-signed.
I'm pretty sure he's a free agent.
Who?
Elijah Moore.
Not sure.
I'll look it up. Contract.
All right. While you're looking up, Saints gets back into the game. Picking up the 102 from May for the 121, Ayuk, Okereke, and Foya Sedaluakan.
How nice to see a high pick go for actual value. Like the 101 got sold for nothing by comparison.
Yes, I agree with that. It's kind of crazy. I assume that he's taking Ted McMillan here, unless he really has a high grade on Cam Ward. I guess look at it one of two ways. Either he traded Ayuk, 2 aging linebackers in the 121 for a quarterback, which is good, or he traded Ayuk, 2 aging but productive linebackers in the 21 for a receiver, and he's basically praying that receiver is Jamar Chase.
I mean, there's a world where that's Travis Hunter, where he has corner eligibility, but he's going to be stacking up dual points, like,
Yeah, it is.
or Genty, if that's enticing the Cardinals, right? Like that's like the high end of what you could hope for it too.
Yes. Cardinals, I think he just goes Genty all day. Maybe he doesn't. I know the Saints and James the Panthers have very similar views on players, so he probably doesn't like Travis Hunter.
So the because he moved Baker, I'm more inclined to think that he might take Ward here.
But he got Gino.
Yeah, but he was like immediately put on his bait when he got him.
Well,
like,
does the Saints have a player on their team that's not on their
well,
trade bait?
that's that touche.
No, I would really like to hope that that's Cam Ward and I have a chance to get the Vikings 103. But I did talk to the Panthers earlier today, and it does sound like the Saints. So
The Saints what?
really like Ted. So
Okay.
we'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, the Tet like high end comp is Drake London, who was a 102 pick.
Yep.
And London's finally really showed up. His last year was really good.
I mean, it's weird how when you absolutely need a running back, you're gonna still take a wide receiver.
I mean,
Well, I get it from that point of view. You can always move receivers for running backs.
yes, I agree. And you take the position that is
That's not exactly the truth in this.
That is not a correct
Well, look how
statement.
Christian McCaffrey's been passed around, man. And he's considered like the second best core running back in the NFL.
Cool.
Look, he's been passed around while he was injured. The second he becomes productive, whoever has him is not moving him. Like productive
you're the
running
Vikings.
backs are hard to come by.
It's true. It is true. That being said, you can always go buy someone like James Conner, who's still productive, just expensive and old. So if you're the Saints, you're like, I really got to compete right now.
and
There's always like Isaiah Pacheco on the Bills. If the Saints offered a couple receivers, maybe a pick for Pacheco,
No way.
he definitely won't move because it's the Bills. But like that would be any other team that'd be a reasonable buy.
I think you're underestimating how valuable productive running backs are.
Derrick Henry just
Yeah.
went for a first with 1 year of actual value left.
Yeah, but you could also, you could substitute that first out with, I don't know, probably Michael Pittman and get Derrick Henry.
No. I think that the value of names is far lesser than the value of unknowns at this time of the year. In season is a totally different thing.
Right now, at this exact moment, the draft picks might be winning out. Just to I could get something great, but really quickly we will shift to what Bill is talking about. I agree.
So really quick, just as a counterpoint to him taking a running back, if you go look at all of the receivers he owns, you see a lot of 100+ point scorers. Then you look at the names, and he doesn't have a wide receiver one.
Yeah, he's building a perfectly fine Goose team.
which is a fine strategy. Like you don't need a wide receiver one when you have 15 point getting wide receivers.
No, I'm
One
not.
of them's going to catch a touchdown and you get your wide receiver 1 points.
Yeah, not knocking it. My thing with that strategy has always been you need an elite name. You have to have one to get further than Goose always does.
I agree with that. Or you could just be the Bengals and have 4 elite names across your other backs and wide receivers.
That's
And then-
how it works. It's very helpful.
He only
No.
has 3.
This is the way.
He will argue you all day long that Juwan Jennings is a big name.
He is a
Guar-
great pick.
Guarantee it.
He is a great pick, but his baby boy is Rip Van Ginkel right now.
It's true. And he also has Trey McBride, which is, the
That's
best
true.
guy in the league right now. You could argue Bowers, but it's still put McBride.
All right. So Baker Mayfield going, as mentioned, for Deshaun Watson, who was similarly cut and claimed off of waivers. So dumping his contract was part of this free Seahawks in here, but Saints was able to dump him for free. The 110, the 219, and the 324. So I know Colts has something to say here about Baker, but for a player that productive on that contract in that offensive system, I feel like that is it's a good deal for the player.
So cheap for Baker Mayfield. I would have traded for the 110 and 219 at overvalue just to get Baker back.
Well, at the end of the day, Deshaun still technically has value until he is actually cut and not in the league anymore.
Yeah, I'd agree with that if the Saints didn't immediately turn around and cut him from his roster.
No, I get it. I don't think
He's obviously not assigning any value to Deshaun Watson.
I get it. It's not a ton of value, but it's like the what if value. It's like Daniel Jones and Justin Fields right now. It's just they have value because we don't know.
Justin Fields has value. I agree with half of this thing.
Yeah.
I
no, but
felt
like
it was a
Baker,
bit rich to be honest. But
You thought it was rich for a top 3 quarterback at sub $15 million.
There's no guarantee he repeats that.
that's exactly
He's
right.
done it 2
Just
years in a
lost
row.
his offensive coordinator. Chris Godwin is likely gone. Mike Evans is another year older. I don't. There's not a guarantee that he puts up the same stats again.
Let's be fair, he didn't have Chris Godwin last year either.
He did for like the first half of the year. I mean, he was ripping it up.
So Godwin and Evans both missed. Evans missed like 6 games. Godwin missed like 9.
He sold at great value because Baker probably just had his career year.
So we know that the Saints has a pick to replace like the quarterback, but my only issue is if this is like a standalone one, I don't like trading Baker for that haul of picks because you're not going to be able to replace Baker with the 110.
No.
I mean, that could be Jackson Dart.
Oh,
Cool.
That's definitely not Baker Mayfield.
Is that
Or
that
Shador. Like, that could be Shador, too. Like, I mean
he's-
Dalton's got 3 picks in the top 10. He already has 2 or 3, QBs. Like, that could be a Shador landing spot.
yeah,
And
but
then
that
it's Gino and Shador. Like, that's
it
not
could
bad.
it could be, but that's not a gamble I would want to take. I don't think it's I don't think it's some horrible thing, and like Saints already has like a way to get a quarterback lined up, so like
He
it's a
has
little bit
Gino.
better.
The league does not properly respect Gino. He is a starting quarterback. The Seattle Seahawks want to extend him. He has a sub $1 million starting quarterback. He's fine.
I
So-
don't believe you. You're just lying to us.
So Gino aside, Baker
I no longer own Gino, and I will still defend this man.
Baker is unreplaceable. There isn't a quarterback in the NFL today that is less than $15 million with the blow up potential of Baker. He has
What?
Joe Burrow blow up potential.
so rookies don't count?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Name
Jaden's doing just fine.
And
Jaden has less points than him.
Hang on. What was your point here? That
My point-
Baker is a high end point scorer that nobody can replicate at his salary.
No. Well, yes and no. He is a gunslinger. He's the type of quarterback that any given week can go out and throw 50 times and end up with 5 touchdowns and 400 yards. He's like Joe Burrow in that way. And he's less than $15 million. There's
Okay.
not that many of those kind of players. Jaden Daniels is a great rookie. He had 2 or 3 games under 10 points last year because he's a rookie and because part of his points come from the ground. So if he's not getting something on the ground going, he's not going to score as much. Baker doesn't have that problem.
So Jaden was the wrong name to give. The answer that you're looking for is Bo Nix.
He had 80 less points than Baker Mayfield.
Great in his
So,
rookie season.
No, so I have no problem with like Baker going for the 110 if there's a Bo Nix in this class, but I don't see it.
Right. There's not
Sure.
6 quarterbacks that are going to go in the top 12.
Yeah, it's not a deep quarterback class. And even then, let's say you're replacing Baker Mayfield with Bo Nix straight across. You're still ending up with a quarterback he's in the same situation as Baker. He's just younger. He doesn't really have any wide receiver weapons. Evan Ingram or fucking Mike Evans and Godwin are aging out for Baker, so he's losing those. Bo Nix doesn't have a name on his roster other than Cortland Sutton. He's probably gone. Is he even still on the Broncos?
Yes, he signed a 4-year extension like 2 years ago.
Yeah, but he's like 30 years old.
What? And
Evans is basically the same age.
like what?
And I mean, that's the comparison, right? If Baker can do that with Evans, Evans missed 6 games, Godwin missed 9. What's Bo Nix? I mean, yeah, it was rookie year, but Baker goes out and throws 5 touchdown games. Bo Nix, I don't think did that a single time. He had 15 less touchdowns than him.
So you want to see a 7-year vet do the same as a rookie
2 years ago, people were calling Baker Mayfield a bust.
because he was.
I 100% disagree. He had 3 great years in Cleveland.
He went to 3 teams in a season.
You got cut mid-season and signed
By
a
the-
backup deal with the Rams. Like, look, you can
It was
both
Carolina.
you can both be right. Like, okay, like
This is true.
calm the fuck down. Like,
what he
Baker-
was is fine, and what he is not the same, and that's
I mean, Baker's a top 8 quarterback in the NFL today.
That's a bit much, but
Fantasy
Baker is a good quarterback that has a job and will likely continue to have a job. So I understand if somebody it doesn't like the price, and I understand if somebody thinks that this price is perfectly fine.
yeah.
Kane Ellis for 2/3. Van Jefferson and 519 for a future 5th, as Bill is now just throwing players off this team as if he could just throw them out of the club.
He's just bailing water out of the raft. Bye, player. See you later.
Get the fuck out of here. You can't go home. Just get the fuck out of here. Rams giving a. I gotta ask Rams how he's able to put these offers together in non-sequential order, because every time I see a trade with draft picks, they're done in sequential numerical order. Rams traded Pete Werner, the 524 and the 413 for Manuel Wilson and Ebiketie. I traded the Colts 26 5th and the Buccaneers 26 5th for 506 and 518. And 323 and Dalen Holker going to the Falcons for the 26 Falcons 3rd round pick and the 26 Falcons 5th round pick. Bill throwing people out of off his roster.
Oh, I got 2 more to go. May as well finish them.
Cleveland Farrell for a 5th. I think Goose is looking for a 4th for him now.
Good luck. Good luck.
He also thinks Hayden Hurst is worth a 2nd round pick.
Jamal Williams and DeMarvin Leal for 2 5ths as Bill tries to take over the 5th round. Cam Taylor Grit for the 330 that Chiefs got from me. Odia Ogbonia for 526. Dolphins dumping Taylor Heineke and KJ Osborne with the 421 to the Chargers. And then using that space to trade more picks to 2026. 309 and 525 to the Chargers for the Chargers 3rd next year and the Eagles 5th next year.
That's a good trade by the Chargers.
Yeah, it's Chargers basically got the picks in 25 for their picks in 26. Nolan Smith and 228 for 131 and 218. I appreciate a trade like this because it shows creativity. It's, hey, Chargers, Bears, you're probably looking for a pick in the 20s for Nolan, and I don't have that. But what if I can manufacture it by doing this? So trade a slide down from 16 to 28 and 131 for Nolan Smith. Like, how's that sound? Like, I appreciate a trade like this because I don't feel like a lot of people get this creative.
As long as Nolan Smith is like the main guy in that rotation, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
And it seems like with some of the players they're extending, like it wouldn't shock me if Josh Sweat is somehow able to be retained. But if he's not, then it makes a ton of sense. And Nolan is absolutely a player you want to have, especially while he's still on his rookie deal.
Chargers better be rooting for Myles Garrett to stay out of Philly.
Oh, I mean, definitely.
With
all this money being thrown around,
right? Like,
he's a free agent. He's probably not coming back.
I can't see Milton or Sweat going back. With all the money being thrown around right now, I'd be pretty surprised if they were both. Unless I guess they could move Huff.
I don't think Bryce Huff comes back either.
Is he a free agent? I thought he still had a year left on his deal.
I mean, either way, I don't think he's going to come back to Philadelphia next year.
That'd be tough. Braden Hassan Reddick for Bryce Huff, and neither player basically last year.
It's a lose-lose, except one team went to the Super Bowl.
True. Huff's got a ring.
It was a superb owl. Hayden Hurst in 318 for the Bengals third next year. So Chiefs turning around and taking Caden Ellis and turning him into Cam Taylor-Britt, Hayden Hurst, and the 318. And now mention those players are on the move as well. Will McDonald for 309, and I get my first back from the Chargers. Chargers uses 202 and 228 to pick up Junior Colson from the Colts. I think that's a nice pickup there, especially for where he went last year. I think it kind of it's a nice upper in terms of value, but right on kind of the pick price I think that he was taken with last year. Saints buying another receiver, 213 and 529 for Keenan Allen and 329. I know we did talk about positional limits. Did we talk about positional maxes with teams? Because I feel like we may have missed a very important topic otherwise.
I don't think we've ever
Is there,
done that.
is there a positional limit for a receiver?
I mean, it's the sort of number of starters plus the number of flexes. So I feel like you can only start 6 receivers max, I feel like, right?
Might be 5.
I thought it was 4.
I think it's more. No, I'm second guessing. I don't know.
Well, the requirement's 2, right?
Yeah, it might be 2 to 4, but I thought it was 2 to 5.
2 flexes.
All right. So 2 and 2 would be 4. So we appreciate Saints is stocking the cabinet full here. Be interesting to see how things progress as we move into pick season there.
I was surprised Keenan Allen still had that much value left on him.
We talked about this pre-pod, but Derrick Henry for Antonio Gibson, 124 and 315. Look, Derrick Henry is one of those rare physical specimens that nothing about him makes sense to begin with. So it's kind of like LeBron in the NBA. Like his body will break down when his body is damn well and ready to break down. And until he gets to that point, I won't be the person to bet against him. So if he's able to replicate what he did last year or this year, 124 is, I think, a perfectly fine piece to give up for that. If the cracks start to show, then this could have been the perfect time to get out.
Yeah. He's like Tom Brady in that. It's like I stopped betting against Tom Brady at like 39, and it continued until like 40. His athleticism is powered strictly from his force of will, and it will never end until he's satisfied with the NFL.
Yeah, at some point it's like I need to just, you know what, I'm throwing bad money after bad money here. So move on here.
Like I predicted his downfall for 2 years. He just had the best season of his career. It's like, all right, well, I guess he's just that good. Never mind. There's a question. How many running backs have arguably the best year of their career at 31?
Not many.
I mean, he's got to be in a total class of his own in that regard. Adrian Peterson, how old was he when he won the MVP? He might have been close.
Did Adrian even play until he was 30? I thought he was done at like
I thought he
20.
retired at like 32 or 33.
I mean, Emmett probably had a pretty decent year, like a year in his 30s.
Frank Gore.
Yeah.
Yeah, Frank Gore was good for a long time.
There's not a lot of them.
No.
But like best year of their career in their 30s. That's crazy.
Well, I mean, he was also on the best team of his career too.
That's true. You know, that's definitely you definitely have to take that into account.
All right. And then Bill continuing to take picks from this year and turn them into picks from next year. Trades the 103 for Christian Watson, Phillies 26th first and my 26th first that I just acquired for McDonald. So again, as picks tend to be shortly lived on my team, Bill picks up 2 more 26 firsts and later picks up another one with Christian Watson. Giants, Christian Kirk and Baron Browning for Calvin Austin, Charles Omenihu, Jordan Hicks, and Trayvon Diggs. Giants, much appreciation for jumping on the goose grenade there. I feel like we all take turns jumping on it, but then unfortunately it's like, Sin in the Final Fantasy X game. There's a short few weeks or months or years of respite, and then Sin returns, and now it's Hayden Hurst and other things being offered around there. But we do appreciate you taking him out of rotation there for a few moments for all of us.
I hit a couple guys there.
Yeah, you kind of cleared the board, which is very nice.
So now it's Hayden Hurst.
Michael Jackson, Jeremy Ruckert for Cleveland Farrell and 318. Again, sometimes I feel like we need those flow charts from Texans to keep track of what's going on with Goose here. But hey, Ruckert was a player I really liked at tight end coming out. I think he's coming into year 3 this year, so could be a nice cheap extension option, especially depending on how things break there in New Jersey.
Yeah, but it's the Jets.
208 for Calvin Austin and Kenneth Murray. Tell you what, that probably ruffled a little bit of Goose's feathers. He'd rather have that 208 for. I don't think he had Murray, but Austin, he was trying to get that. I think that second for a real long time. So good on you there, Giants. And then, as mentioned, Christian Watson did get turned into the Buccaneers 26 first, but went with 310, 325, 326, 428, and the KC 26 third. So Chiefs breaks down the first into Christian Watson, who could be extended because his 5th option has been picked up, and a bunch of late round picks. And then Zach Bond for the Cowboys, 26 second.
It's a lot. All in a row. Bill, you were just preying on the downfall of all the good teams, aren't you?
I'm not looking forward to them being good.
I mean, you got the Bucks, you got the Eagles, you got the newly revamped Vikings, all of which look good. You're just like, everybody break their legs, just everybody.
Oh, they can't all be good.
Yep, just statistically, a couple of us are going to miss the playoffs and be bad. So
they're all in the NFCs. If you're going to bet on anything, it's good to bet on teams in one conference.
Was definitely unintentionally done that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing here that's kind of mind blowing. I kind of like the Giants Cowboys trade. I mean, the Cowboys are a little confusing because I'm not sure I see a true contender there right now, but appreciate the moves. The values there.
The trade for 103. Do we want to discuss that?
Sure.
I'm just more curious on other opinions. Like, did people think it was good, bad, not very noteworthy?
I guess my question is, if the first quarterback in the draft is there at 103, is Cam Ward worth more or less than Watson and 2 current somewhat late round picks?
In 26.
In 26. And I get you're trying to keep points off your team, right? But this definitely feels like a pick that you could have waited to on the clock sell for someone that's kind of desperate for a quarterback, likes Ward, or maybe Ward doesn't go and Tet's there. But you can get somebody jumping up to get Tet McMillan.
Yeah, but who likes to be patient?
That's fair. I certainly don't. That's why I bought Justin Herbert last year.
Yeah, I agree with waiting. You probably could have gotten more. I mean, we'll see what Mike's pick is. RJ, we're assuming your pick is going to be a late first. Mike, I have you definitely in the second half of the draft. In my like mental power rankings. So like maybe it's pick 16, but like it's probably pick 20 something. I don't know.
I mean, there's a lot of question marks on Mike's roster. Like he needs JJ McCarthy to do good, and he needs McCaffrey to come back healthy. Jerome Ford to be the starter in Cleveland, and Ayuk to come back healthy and good. He needs to find a tight end, and probably another D end. He's got plenty of picks for all that, so he can shore up. He's got 3, 7, 13, 18, 21 in the first round. And if that isn't at least a running back, a tight end, a D end that are all going to produce, I'd be shocked. So,
Yeah, I have no doubt that. I mean, I highly suspect that Mike's roster will look vastly different before kickoff week 1. So
always does, baby. Always does.
Yeah.
Well, what are you guys referring to? That doesn't sound like me at all.
But he did trade his first, so like he's incentivized here to try and compete.
Now,
Yeah.
there is a team that would be a perfect trading partner with Mike. Unfortunately, trading's not what they do. He could really use DNs. He has a lot of picks. There's a team out there with TJ Watt and Max Crosby just lamenting. Perfect trading partners.
Crosby being locked away on that team is quite sad.
So, hey, maybe you get something going there. I'm putting the idea in your head, Mike.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I have traded with Eric a number of times in the past, and we'll be happy to again and send him some trade ideas. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, you have $90 million in cap space, so you can afford to add some guys.
So we'll see what happens there. But as mentioned, a lot to cover, and we didn't even go as deep into the players as we could have, and we still hit an hour and a half. So we want to leave some time for the fun part, so we'll transition to that. So get those offers in because you never know what's going to be accepted. But appreciate having the four of you guys on with me as we start kicking off in the draft season, as we get measurables and more things happening. As mentioned, we had Joey Bosa get cut while we were on the pod here, so we're going to see some vets on new teams next week and start to get some numbers and some things actually starting to happen draft wise and new teams wise. So it's exciting. I'm on the edge of my seat here, but let's just get to the fun part. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll get you again next week, but until then, sayonara.